This is online lab module 4 number 1, and in this program we're going to create a function that returns a decimal data type value, which could be either a float or a double depending upon which one you choose. That's why I put in decimal and print the value to the screen. The function should calculate the net income by taking out the gross income from the user and the taxes. So let's create our little mini IPO. So input, we are going to need basically a gross income. And that's not necessarily the variable name, but that's what we're going to need. So then we're going to process, and then I'll put output. So the next thing we're going to process is we need to get the process D, gross net income. And what a good idea to do would be to put in something like calculations. And basically the gross income, or rather the net income, equals the gross income minus percentage or the taxes times the gross. So that's the actual formula. But here, to make it better, we would add some extra variables. Now, I also recommend doing it is putting in the variables that you're going to need. And I think a lot of times this will help you, and then you can modify them. So we need the gross income. We need the net income. We need a constant percent. And we need the taxes. So these are the variables that we're going to need to do it. Of course, the constant percent is not a variable, and the output would be whatever we want, but definitely we want the net income. So we'll take it from here. And I really believe that this will be very helpful for you when you're doing your programs. So let's start out with here. I'm going to dump all of this stuff. We don't really need it. And we don't need to begin code here, hopefully. So the first thing we need to do is to determine our variable types. So gross income really should be a double. And when I say double, I'm going to use double or float, and they both mean the same thing. Net income is going to be a double. Constant percentage will be a double or float, and taxes will be a double or float. So let's start off with declaring our variables. So let's use double so we don't get that stupid conversion warning. And we'll use gross income equals 0. Now again, you could put 0 or 0.0. Doesn't really matter. Whatever your call. Net income. Then we want taxes. And because we're done here, so now we want a constant. Double. And let's call it tax percent. And in this particular case, because it's 7%, then what we want is 7 divided by 100. Now, tell me what's wrong with this. Going once, going twice. If you can guess what's wrong with this, all expense trip to Hawaii. Ooh, got you guys stumped. What is a very dangerous thing that you can do when you're dividing things? It's set forever. Well, that's the purpose of a constant. So technically, but that's not the problem. What is the type of division that I have warned you from week 1?
Integer division.
Integer division. Well, we have, look what we're having. We have a double here. We're dividing an integer by an integer. So what will happen is before it puts it in the tax percent, it's going to divide 7 by 100, which will get 0.07. But because it's an integer, it's going to just drop off anything after the decimal point, and it would be 0. So what we need to do, one of two things, or one of three things. We can make this, this is probably the easiest thing. We can make it 100.0. We could make this 7.0, or we could do double. Obviously, we don't want it in capitals. Convert it to double. I'm just going to put a 0.0 here. And what might not be a bad idea, I think I have an extra thing here. What might not be a bad idea, whenever you're doing this, go and do C out. Just to make sure that your tax percent doesn't have any hidden prizes or hidden issues. So let's go and run this just to make sure that we're getting 0.07. All right, so 0 is 0.07. Now, I'm going to just make a point, and I'm going to get rid of that, just to show you what will happen. And the tax percent is 0. So I like that. I wish that was the case. And let's go and put a 7.0 here. And it's 0.07. So again, the actual issue is whether or not you want to put a double or a float here, or you can just change it to put a 0.0 or that, whatever you want. I need to put my C out here. So I get the extra thing. All right, so now that we know this is established, we don't need this anymore. Now you see it, now you don't. So let's go and see out what is the gross salary. Put a question mark and then a space. We will get in our salary. So we're looking at the formula for, of course, this should be gross income. And now what we want to do is we need a calculation. So to me, it's much easier if you break it down into just one step. So let's take taxes equals, so it's just going to be the gross income times the tax percent. And of course, if I actually could spell, I would do better. And then our net income is just going to subtract it. So our net income equals gross income minus taxes. See out. Gross income. And this is just kind of standard, but not always required. Gross income is gross income. Taxes will be taxes. And then net income will be net income. So I like when you're doing a whole bunch of stuff to just make one C out and just break it line by line. You could do C out gross income and get rid of this and just do an NL or C out. You know, again, that's just a matter of your personal preference, which way you want. The concept is you want to make your program where it's readable by both you and me and anybody else that may later on look at it and say, oh, I have to modify it. Or, you know, there are times that when I was programming, I was just stuck and I could not understand. Everything I did just seemed perfect, and I would ask somebody for help. What is the issue? And they would normally be able to say, okay, your issue is here, because number one, they're looking at something more objectively than I do. You know, when you proofread something, the reason why they tell you don't proofread is because you're really proofreading in your mind and visualizing what you know is already there, versus somebody that's going to actually look at it. But, you know, the concept is if it's broken down and easy to read, they're going to find your error much quicker than if they had to go through the code and try to figure out what you're doing. So let's run this thing with something simple. We'll do $10,000. And then let's see what happens. So gross income is $10,000, taxes are $700, net income is $93. So that looks out good. So now this is your lucky day, because I am going to do this program using 3 different employees. Okay, come on, I know I can do this. I'm going to do this program using 3 different employees, but before we do it, let's go and create the function, because it says we need to create a function that's going to calculate the net income. So the return type is going to be a double, and we'll just call it calc net income. Now we're going to need to pass information to it. So we're going to return the net income, so we don't need to pass that. We have to pass the gross income, which is a double, and then we have to make a decision. We can either pass the tax percent as well, or we can, because it's a constant, it's okay to make it a global constant. So because we've done the global constants in the past, let's pass it as a parameter. Now it's actually better to pass it as a parameter in most cases, because that way it's very specific to what you're going to do. But either way, it works just fine. So we have a double, and then we have a double. And we get the semicolon here. So let's go. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
If you pass a constant, you pass it. You pass it as what it actually is, not just a constant. In the prototype, which is up here, you only have to pass the data types and in here. So you don't specify constant in there.
you just specify like when you're calling. So when we get the actual function call, I'll go back and explain it in there. So, but for the prototype up here, you're going to only call it the data types in here. And putting in the parameter names that's totally optional to you. So here we're going to return something. So we'll leave it as 00 for right now. And this is calc net income. So we're going to actually write calc net income. So we need the gross, and I'll just call it gross. And it's totally up to you if you want to make a constant, a constant capitalized letters in there. So because we know it can't change regardless, it's irrelevant, but just to be consistent, let's call it tax percent. And we have one other issue, and we need to pass the taxes in here. So I'm going to show you how to do this by breaking this function into two functions. So now that I've got you confused, but let's just do this right now. We're going to do it like 3 different ways. One way is this way, but we won't be able to return the taxes. Another way would be to pass the taxes as a parameter that can be changed. I'm not a big fan of that, but that's okay, because really to me, you're calculating the net income. You shouldn't be calculating anything else or setting anything else. So again, a lot of these things are judgment calls. So in the beginning, I think it's best that we create 2 functions. One that calculates the taxes and one that calculates the net income. So in this particular case, let's change this thing, calculate net income, and let's just pass the taxes. Let's go back up. And remember, I've said a bunch of times, it's always better to take a problem and break it down into the smallest problems as you can get. Do one step at a time. So let's go and do a double. And we're going to calc taxes. So we need to pass a double, and we need to pass another double. So let's see if we can get this thing written. Spelling was never one of my greatest achievements. So we need to pass the gross income, or whatever you want to call it. Remember, you can call it whatever you want in here, because this is just a name in here. It has nothing to do with the other. The value that gets passed we'll be putting into this. So then we want a double, and we can call this the tax percent. You know, again, it's kind of your call, because this can't get changed, but then again, gross can't get changed either, because we're just passing a value. We're not passing anything. So gross technically is a constant, tax percent is technically a constant. So what we want to do here is we need to create a variable called double, and we'll call it taxes. And then all we need to do is taxes equals gross times tax percent. Now notice the only thing in this is the stuff between the braces. So bear that in mind. So that would definitely help you never doing anything that is not actually in that function. So let's just do tax percent. We're going to return the taxes. So we're just going to calculate this here and nothing else and test it with that. So we're looking at it, so we're getting the gross income. We have the tax percent that's being passed, and then we're doing double. Now, why this is done this way would be probably best because suppose you had different taxes that you are collecting in there. Maybe you would have something that says calc Social Security tax, calc Medicare tax, calc FICA tax. You know, then you can use calc taxes based upon the percentage that you passed in instead of having to write a separate function for each one. So again, don't stress yourself out about that right now. Let's just go and do the one thing. So here we are, taxes equals, so now we need to change this. And we want to do calc taxes. We're going to pass gross income. And we're also going to pass the tax percent. Then we're just going to go see out taxes. So let's just see if we calculated the taxes correctly. You know, again, you want to do one thing. Test it to make sure it's right. So let me give you a perfect example as to how important that is. Suppose you are going someplace and the directions are go 2 blocks, turn left, go 3 blocks, turn right, go 4 lights, turn left, blah, 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 blah. If one of those things is wrong, that throws everything else off. So you want to always make sure that you're headed in the right direction. Same concept here. You always want to make sure that what you're doing is correct right from the get-go. So let's run this thing and see if we've calculated taxes correctly. Gross salary is $10,000 and boom. So you have $700, our gross income, we're printing out, taxes are $700, and net income we're not actually calculating, so that makes sense. So we still have this, see out taxes, and we still have that. So we're good there. So our next step is calculate the net income. Well, we already know what our taxes are, so what we want to do is pass the calc net income, and we want to pass the gross income, and we want to pass taxes. And let's see what that does for us and see if this fixes everything. Let me go to the calc net income to make sure that we've done it, which we obviously have not done this. So we're going to do a double. And we'll call it net income. And we can do net income equals the gross minus taxes. And then we will be returning the net income. Now, you could not do this net income and do return gross minus taxes. You could do that. or you can do, there's a different way. But in the beginning, it's much clearer when you just do the one thing over here. So returning net income, and then if you need to add something, it makes it a lot easier to add. So let's go and run this puppy. Gross salary is $10,000 and $700 gross income. 700. Let's try it with something, an eyeball amount. We'll do 1,250.75 or 227. So hopefully that looks right. I'm not going to use my calculator to do it, but you definitely want to do it. So that takes care of that one over here. I just created the two things. To me, breaking down a big problem into little problems is, to me, much easier than just writing everything at one spot in there. So let me put the video on pause.